Hello and welcome to the Convex Conversation with me, broadcaster Helen. This week I'm in beautiful Cumbrian countryside, just a few miles away from Kendal, at Strictly Organic Farm, home to the Robinson family since 1875 and their herd of pedigree shorthorns. I first met and interviewed James, who runs the 300-acre farm with his dad Henry, at a BBC Countryfile event. I was struck at the time by his passion for the environment and biodiversity, and his determination to highlight the difficulties modern-day farmers face to make a decent living in a world where cheap imported food is in abundance and supermarkets are all-powerful. He also had a strange feeling that one day I'd visit the Robinson family and see for myself that work that goes in 365 days a year, stroll along their miles of hedgerow, nature-filled wetlands, clover fields, and meet the bovine stars of Strictly's social media posts. So, James, here I am at the farm, enjoying a cuppa with you. It's a real privilege, and I really mean that, to be here.
Yeah, welcome to Strictly, and thanks for inviting me.
Well, I so enjoy your posts.
Yeah, it's nice to sort of show almost the hidden side of what we do, really. I think people maybe think that farms run themselves quite often, but there's a huge amount of work that goes into it. So it's nice to share our, what we might think as an everyday, mundane thing that we're doing. It's nice to share that with people.
It looks magical to me when you're out with the animals and you're posting some really artistic pictures actually of the cows. I like it sometimes when you've got a whole scene of just cows' bottoms. That sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? But you do some great pictures.
Yeah, we probably spend most of our life behind a cow, looking at its bum, because that's the business end really, where the udder is and stuff. So we do tend to spend maybe an obscene amount of time behind a cow, yeah.
You are a fifth generation farmer. It's a phrase that's overused, but farming truly is in your DNA. Tell me a little bit about the history, because you've been here, well, not you personally, but for more than 100 years.
So our family came here originally in 1875. So my great-great-granddad, there was a lot of children. I think he maybe had 8 or 9. I think him and his wife had worked originally in a milk house in Liverpool, which is where, before there was any pasteurisation of any milk and what have you, they would have the cows actually in the city. So they would take the cows into the city and bring all the feed into them, and the cows would be tied up by the neck all their lives basically in the city, and they were milked, and that's how they got milk into the city. And then as technology improved, then of course they could then take the milk in rather than just the cows. So they earned some money down there, made enough that they could then take on a tenancy from Underley Estate, and they landed up here with a good rake of kids on the train, I think it would be, and then took the tenancy here in the spring of 1875, yeah.
And in those days when cows were in the city, guessing people were just drinking raw milk, were they? Yeah,
very much so, yeah. There wouldn't be any pasteurisation at the time then, so it was the easiest way to transport a very perishable product, really. Entirely different to now. The way of life then was incredibly hard. They didn't know anything else, of course, but everything was manual. Everything was horse-powered or horse-drawn or just manual, literally, by hand. So.
And how things have changed, hey, sitting here in 2022. Give us a sense of what I'm sure there isn't particularly a typical day as such, but what is life on the farm like?
Yeah, being a dairy farm, I think there probably is a typical day that everything's the same at either end of the day. You've got to milk twice a day, you've got to feed them twice a day and muck them out. The day is always bookended with this sort of doing up, as we call it. It's on the milking and the feeding. The alarm goes off at 5 o'clock and I sort of land out into the yard by 5:30 every morning, and I don't mind the mornings at all. You soon get used to them, and in fact you miss the not getting up, I think, if you are lucky enough to have a lie-in. It takes a few hours to do milking and feeding and stuff every day. Even on Christmas Day, it's still got to be done. Same at the other end of the day. And then the middle part of the day is pretty much wintertime, it's hedge laying, all day, every day on a fine day. And then summertime, it's getting the crops in, ready for the winter. So, yeah, farming in this country is winter for half the year, and then the other half you're preparing for it.
There's always a job to be jobbed, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. You never, ever get to the bottom of that list. Like, never. There's always something you could do.
Do you like the fact, James, that this for you is a real way of life? There's no 9 to 5 with this. You live, you breathe it 365 days a year. You've just said you're milking on Christmas Day. Do you enjoy that, or is that something that you've probably never known any different?
I've never known any different, but I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I've been on farm since the dot for me. It is just something that I always wanted to do. That doesn't mean that I was forced into it at all. That was what I wanted to do. I've got a brother who does things in computers near Derby. I've got a sister near Leicester. They're not in farming at all, and yet they were brought up in the same environment. And my son, he's very keen on farming. He's just coming up towards 18. He's doing an apprenticeship in agriculture at the local college. It's quite likely that he'll come back on farm full time and end up taking over. So he'll be the 6th generation. But he's got a younger brother who's not into farming at all either, and he's doing computer science. So the environment probably doesn't make you the farmer. It's just what you want to do, I think.
I know that when we've had our cup of tea, we are going to meet the stars of Strictly, which I'm looking forward to. We saw a few of them smiling as they drove into the farm. But tell me about the Shorthorns. I mean, they are as deeply rooted in Strictly as you are. What makes them special? And tell me a bit about the breed.
The breed is the oldest pedigree breed in the world. So the herd book is 200 years old this year, 1822. So it's the oldest herd book in the world. We've been part of that herd book for over 100 years. 1915, I think, was the first pedigree registered ones from here. Because we were part of Underley Estate, the Earl of Bective, he had a very, very good herd of Shorthorns. And they used to send the bulls out for testing so they could get a proof, as they call it, so the daughters of the bull, they knew what they were going to be like. Were they going to be good milkers, were they bad-tempered, good feet and legs, that type of thing. So they would send them out to the farm so they could get this proof, so they become proven, and then they would take them home. So we were lucky at Strictly that my great-grandfather got some very good bulls loaned out here and then started up a very good pedigree herd.
And that bloodline is unbroken for more than 100 years, isn't it? So they didn't, thankfully, fall victim to foot and mouth, for example.
No, we were very lucky. We were the only dairy Shorthorn herd left in Cumbria at the time. I think there'd be 10 or 12 good herds that got lost entirely. There's a lot around in Cumbria again now, so they have got the numbers back up. And it's a breed that, for us, does really well on our systems. The topography of our farm is long and narrow and steep and wet, and it's not ideal for walking a soft cow on. So we need a real hard, tough cow that's going to look after itself. So that's why we've got the dairy Shorthorns, because they're quite a stoic cow that's got a bit of will to live.
You need a will to live, don't you? I would imagine on some winter days and you're in the middle of nowhere and that wind's howling.
It is cold and wet and stuff. And we do try and extend our grazing as much as we can. So we've got the cows going out as soon as the weather conditions allow. Because if you've got 100 cows trampling across the field, they're going to make a mess. You know, a 600 kilo cow is a lot of weight to be trampling across the field. So you need to make sure the ground conditions are right before they go out. And that's why wintertime our cattle are in, and that's why virtually all dairy cows are in through the winter months, because of the wet weather.
And are they sensational for milk?
They're not going to give the same amount of milk as a black and white Holstein Friesian. That's the sort of the dairy cow that people imagine when they see one. Those herds might be doing 9,000 or 10,000 litres a year. Ours are doing 7,000 litres a year per animal. Quality's better. The health of the cow is better because we're not pushing them to that extent. The fertility and feet and legs and all that. We have a cow that's going to be kind to us, really. We don't really want to do any more work than we have to on them. You know, we want them to look after themselves, really.
James, we're out and about and you've got a glass and a jug in your hand. What are we up to?
I thought you'd better sample some of our milk while we're here. So this is the milk from this morning, and this tank, we call it a bulk tank, so this will hold just over 5,000 litres of milk. At the moment we're sending 4,500 litres every other day.
That's a lot of milk.
It's a lot of milk, yeah, and that's just one little farm.
This is raw milk then,
So this
James?
is raw milk, so this is from this morning's milking. So it's literally from cow to tank to jug to glass.
This is as sustainable as it gets, really, isn't it?
Yeah, there's nothing in there but pure.
But pure goodness.
Pure organic milk.
Here goes. Oh my goodness, now that is how milk should taste, hey? Have I got a milk moustache? We'll have another little sip. This is good for me as well, isn't it?
It's really, really good for you. So it's got all the fantastic positive bacteria in there as well. It's really good for gut health. It's high protein. It's only 4.5% fat, but it's really good fat in there as well.
So it'll make me look 10 years younger, really.
It's worked already.
Has it? Excellent. Love it.
There's been a lot of studies done, I think, hasn't there, on rehydration drinks and stuff, especially like, high performance, like rugby players, football players and stuff. And milk is supposed to be the best rehydration drink there is. Better than any of these, or like Lucozades or anything, like Gatorades or anything. Milk is far, far better. And then it's got all the added other benefits in it as well, hasn't it?
It's absolutely delicious. I'm not a massive milk person, but I love raw milk.
Milk in a supermarket, water is more expensive than milk. And the amount of goodness that's in a bottle of milk or in a glass of milk like that, it's just the perfect food, isn't it, really?
Should we go and see who's responsible for this?
We better go and see him, haven't we?
So, James, where are we now, other than surrounded by cows?
One of our main buildings. Yeah, they're a bit unsure of us. They're wondering what you're doing. These cows are what we call dry cows, so these are on their holiday from milking. In theory they milk 10 months of the year, and then there's 2 months when they're what we call in calf, when they're dry, and then it just gives them a chance to recharge their batteries a bit before they calve again.
They're beautiful looking animals,
this,
aren't they?
this one in front of us is actually an in-calf heifer, so this one hasn't calved yet. If you're looking at a tag Tells her the date of birth in there, so 16th of February, so she's not quite 2-year-old. She'll calve, I think she's due about March. So you can see it would have just started to develop a little bit compared to that cow that's just going past. She's due with her 3rd calf and that's due with her 4th calf, both in about a month's time.
And Abigail from Strictly gave birth in the early hours of New Year's Day. What's it like for you seeing new life arrive?
You never get tired of it. I always love being there when a calf's been born. It's just something that when you've seen the mother being born as well, and you've seen its grandmother and great-grandmother being born, some of these cow families go back over 100 years. They've been here part of Strictly as much as Robinsons have, and we've grown up alongside them. Yeah, there might have been 20 generations of cows compared to 5 or 6 generations of Robinsons, but we've always just worked together here. It's just great to see that continuing, really.
And you can see, just standing here for a few minutes, their personalities. I mean, who's this over here to our right?
Pyrrhus Rose, her name, Strictly Pyrrhus Rose. She's born 26th of October 2016, so she's 5 and a bit year old. Sired by Lemongrove Hoffman, so her dad's actually Australian. And yeah, she's fit.
They seem friendly. Are they friendly? Can you touch them, James? Do they sometimes come up and have a nozzle?
Oh, yes, very much. Certain cows won't. Certain cows are a bit more standoffish and they'll just keep out the way. Other cows, they're really inquisitive and they'll come and sniff and rub, just see what's going on, really. It's the same as people. You get a crowd of people, you're going to end up with some that are real bolshing at the front and wanting to be there, and you get others that are a bit more timid at the back and just wanting just to observe what's happening, like, and that's exactly what's happening in this building. This one looking over the top here. So she's really interested in what we're doing, but she's not quite brave enough to come and have a sniff.
And this one's coming a bit closer. This one's hello. So if I put my hand out, do they like being touched?
Some of them do, some of them don't. We've got this rotating brush.
It looks like a car wash.
He'll nudge you his head, and then it just rubs along its back or its bum or its head or whatever it wants scratching. Sometimes you'll get them and they'll stand here for 10-15 minutes at a time.
I see pictures of you out and I see lots of bottoms heading up the lane. Are they well behaved when you're trying to move them, or is it quite something trying to get them to the field?
They're really, it's like creatures of habit. You know, they really are. So they know we could probably get away with walking them on the main road without anyone in front of them, turn them out at the lane end, they would know which gate to go in. They're real creatures of habit. So if they were used to going in that field, they would just keep doing it. In terms of time of day and stuff, they'll all be waiting at the gate at 3:30, 4 o'clock when they know it's milking time. Same in the morning, they're always up when you go and get them in summertime.
In terms of size, it's difficult on a podcast to get the size and quite how it feels standing in here. It feels a real privilege to be so close to such big beasts of animals. I mean, how much would some of the bigger ones weigh? So
this one behind us that we were looking at before, she'll be, I think, about 700 kilos, 750 kilos. She's probably getting towards the biggest of what we've got. Smaller cows, younger cows, they're going to be more around the sort of 580, 600 kilos. But she's carrying a calf, so she's got 50 kilo calf inside her, plus all the fluids. She could have 80, 90 kilos of stuff that's going to come out in about a month. There's a certain condition they've got to have on them as well, so she's nearly too fit, so she's nearly got too much condition on her, really. We don't want any fitter than that. You don't want them too lean either. You want them just in this sort of peak condition at calving, and we've got to really look at that when we're managing them through the year as well. This is a milking pallet, so they come in 12s, and what we do, we teat prep them as we call it, so we'll put like a foam dip on them to start with, dip each teat with that, clean them off, so the teat's nice and clean, so the milk that's coming out then is nice and clean as well. Once that's done and clean, we then put this milking unit on. As far with them, it's got a bit of light vacuum on it, so when it goes on, it stops on, and it's not like sucking the milk out of the quarter. All it's doing is sucking the milk away from the teat, and it pulses. If your parlour was going, you put your finger in there, and you would feel it just sort of gently squeezing it, and it's just to mimic the actual action of a calf sucking. So there's 4 of those. Milk comes up this blue pipe through that meter there, and it tells us how much milk each cow's giving, and it would let us know then if there was a problem. So if there was a sudden milk drop, it would flash up a warning on that, so we know there might be something wrong with the cow's health as well. So each cow is identified with an electronic tag as well, so when it walks past that screen at the end, it then comes to an individual stall, and there's a certain amount of feed gets dropped out in front of it, depending on how much milk it's giving, how far in its lactation it is, so how long it is since it's calved, whether it's back in calf again. We can set all those parameters up so it gets a precise amount of feed then to maintain its body body condition.
They are happy cows, aren't they, James?
They don't really want for anything, to be honest now. And they've got the beds where they're on. They've actually got some latex-topped mattresses as well, so they've got a really comfy bed that's clean and scraped away and bedded twice a day. So they get their beds changed twice a day. It's just like you've been in a hotel, isn't it?
It's nice. I think I'll put myself in. How key was the beck to you when you were growing up?
I spent most of my summer holidays seem to go on forever when you're kids, isn't they? You know, that 6 weeks just seemed endless, and I would spend virtually every day in the beck or sitting by the side of it or something. I'd be fishing, catching very little, but I'd have a little float and a worm, you know, and I'd be sitting there trying to catch some big trout that I could see.
It's great for you being out in nature, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, I spend a lot of time, sometimes in summer, I'll bring the dog sometimes, other times I'll just come and I'll sit. I mean, I've struggled with my mental health a lot the last 12 months. Plucked up courage to go to the doctor, so I was clinically diagnosed. It was only by talking to some friends that actually got me to actually go to the doctor where I actually did it. And I found walking a lot has really helped this year, and I'll just walk and I'll come down here and I'll just sit and just being in nature really helps.
I think Prince William's talked about that a lot, hasn't he? Walking and clearing his head, and it just feels a much more simple way of life when you're out in nature and out at one with nature.
I mean, it's an incredibly stressful job. Very, very isolating. You know, there won't be a single job that's any more isolating. And these last 2 years especially, I think it's been hard because, I mean, you don't get off farm very much anyways. There's a nice poem, W.H. Davis, I think. What is this life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare, no time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep and cows. And I think that is just, I love that. And it's just being able to, like we are now, stood by a beck, just looking as to what's happening.
That was an amazing experience. Thank you for taking me out to the cowshed, she says with a big smile on her face. It was lovely to meet some of your characters that I look at on your socials. Now we're back in the warm. Tell me a bit about the milk. I mean, it's organic. What does that mean for you in terms of feeding the cows? And is that what makes it extra delicious?
We always love our milk. We've been drinking it raw ever since we could drink milk, of course. So it's just a beautiful natural product. You know, there is literally nothing added into it, a single ingredient. You don't need any ingredients on a bottle of milk because it is just cow's milk in there. And when it's unhomogenised and unpasteurised, you get this lovely fat layer on the milk, you know, this cream layer that settles out in the top. So it's quite high fat and protein milk. It's quite good quality milk. We say quite high fat, it's 4.5% fat. We're still not talking unhealthy drink. It's a really healthy drink to have. Supermarket milk is about 3.8, but because it's homogenised, you don't get this cream layer on the milk that everyone always seems to reminisce about from doorstep deliveries or when they were having the school milk bottles. There was always this cream layer. So we still get that, so we're really lucky that we have that. The majority of the diet for the cows is grown here, so it's the forage, it's the green stuff in winter, and then we make hay and silage to store for winter months, and then we supplement that with bought-in feed. 3 years ago we made a decision to not feed any soya or palm oil in the feed, because you buy a concentrated feed and there's a long list of ingredients on it that they put in there to get the protein levels right, the energy levels right, the starch and all that, and quite often it includes soya. So we made a decision to take that out because we didn't want to be part of this whole deforestation of the Amazon or whatever it might be, or displacing other crops in other areas. So we made a decision, no soya, no palm oil. We thought it'd be easy, and it was a lot harder than what it should have been, really. The dairy industry has bred this fantastic cow that can produce loads and loads of milk. Over the last 100 years, probably, of pedigree breeding, it's got to the stage now where nutritionists are struggling to feed that cow to perform. You know, it really could be able to, and that's why they feed some imported soya within the diet as well, just to give it a real high protein boost. Because our cows are organic and they're dairy shorthorns, they don't need quite that level of feed to keep the production where it is, so we took that soya out and it hasn't affected their yields at all. The feed is slightly dearer because it's a dearer source of protein that we're having to feed now, like beans or lucerne or whatever, peas, but it's definitely achievable, and it is something really that as an industry we've got to really look at. We don't really want to be growing crops in South America to feed to cows on a wet hillside in Cumbria. It doesn't seem right to me. We need to be able to feed as much as we can that's grown in this country, or at least in Europe.
We'll talk about the environment, sustainability, the impact that here, literally in the middle of nowhere in beautiful countryside, the impact that you can have and that we can all have on the world in a minute. But what challenges do British farmers face now, James, and family farms like you? to make a good enough living and to survive, given the fact that so many of us are reliant on mass supermarkets and there's so much cheap food being imported? What are the main things that you face?
I think it's always faced challenges, it always will do. Farming is probably most affected by global markets than any other industry. And given that the majority of farms, certainly in this country, are small family farms, you really feel at the mercy of some big boys, either big supermarkets or multinational companies that are sort of dictating prices and input costs and everything. Which is why being organic for us as well, it's like we're stepping aside from that really, so we're not reliant on fertiliser prices, which at the moment have gone absolutely sky high. We're not affected at all by chemical firms and what have you, things like Roundup or whatever it might be, so we don't use any pesticides at all. So we're kind of stepped aside from that. The main costs for us are buying in feed, and then of course the main thing we sell is the milk, and if the world prices for milk are poor, then our price for milk is the same as well. We are going to be tying up with a local cheesemaker to make some mozzarella in the next month or two. That'll be starting, so we're trying to be a bit more masters of our own destiny rather than being price takers. We're trying to be price makers, which for a farm is quite tricky really, when the majority of farms sell their product at the end of the lane to someone else to market, to someone else to develop the product or whatever it might be. It's given away to someone else to do. So we haven't really, as an industry, had to really think very hard about that. But that's ended up with the situation where we are at the bottom end of a very, very tight margin industry. There's very little left by the time it gets down to farmers.
And what about the recent impact of trade deals?
I think we'd hoped when all the promises that were made at Brexit that we'd be able to get the best trade deals we could have had, and everyone was quite buoyant about that. I didn't really see the point of leaving Europe and all the security that had, but anyway, the majority decision was we were going to leave, and we've spent a lot of years negotiating and still ended up with some pretty rubbish deals by the sound of it. The Australian trade deal is going to have a real impact on British farmers in a few years. We've got a few years' grace on it, but it looks to be quite worrying, certainly for the meat industry. The government sort of didn't want to be seen as being protectionist and stuff, but to me, protecting an agricultural industry which is covering 70% of the country in terms of land use, and then diets for its citizens and food quality and air and soil and water quality, it just seems bizarre that has been given away really for very little. For family farms like us, we are almost at the mercy of world markets still, and yet we shouldn't have been.
And it's a shame, isn't it? Because I would imagine that we have the ability to be world leaders in terms of sustainable and regenerative farming. We could be world leaders, couldn't we?
We could, and there's just so much passion and knowledge in the UK and in our industry to become world leaders in sustainable farming. And regenerative, it's a word that's sort of bandied about a lot at the moment, but in reality, it's just good farming. Organic is a form of regenerative farming. And it's just good farming. It's looking after the soil, it's looking after the animals, the air and the water quality, and just being a good custodian of the land, seeing that it's in a better state than it was when you took it on. And that's why family farms are really so important. We need more small farmers. We don't need less. We don't need bigger farms. We need more farmers on the ground. Whether it's family farms, whether it's community-supported agriculture, we need more people involved with the production of the food. We need that involvement from consumers, really, so they can see the passion and the work that goes into producing the food that they're actually eating.
I love your phrase, ask and be awkward.
Yeah, I put that on because I want people to really quiz where their food's coming from. It's easy just to go into a supermarket and pick up a plastic packaged bit of food that might be great food on the inside of it. You don't really know, and you don't know where it's come from. You don't know who's grown it, what's been used to grow that food as well. Has it been transported across the Atlantic, or is it grown 5 miles down the road? Even if it's in a supermarket, they should be able to tell you where it's come from and the production methods. Or you go to your more local supermarket. We're lucky around here that we have Booth Supermarket, which are a really good local supermarket, that they know all their suppliers and everything. Go to farmers markets, go to farm shops and stuff. And I know it's not easy for a lot of people. There's a lot of talk that we should be eating less meat, but I think we need to eat less meat, but better quality meat. It's so nutrient dense, is good quality meat, that it seems bizarre to be flying something from the other side of the world to replace that meat, or growing something in a lab to make it look like meat, when we've got this brilliant product, which if reared on a regenerative system especially, it isn't contributing to the climate crisis, it's actually doing the opposite, and it's actually helping it. So we're actually storing more carbon in the soil by the correct grazing methods and what have you. So
But that's it. It's all linked, isn't it? Health is linked. I don't want to eat an apple that's been in a warehouse for 3 months and then's been packed in plastic and it doesn't taste like it's been picked from the tree. So if you buy local and it hasn't come miles and miles, you're helping the environment in that it hasn't been transported, but you're eating something much better for you as well that tastes how it should. So it's all linked, isn't it? The food chain and the health of our nation and sustainability and the protection of the planet, it's all connected. And we could be eating better and being kinder to the planet and having a better life all round if we think a bit harder about food provenance.
Yeah, and it's seasonal. We're so used to going into a supermarket and having strawberries at any time of the year. Yeah, certain foods we have to import. We're always going to have to import things like bananas or pineapples, whatever it might be.
Do you not grow bananas here?
It'd be nice
Now you tell me,
it'd be
James.
nice if we had the climate in Cumbria to grow bananas. Maybe one day with climate change, you never know. I mean, the old meat and 2 veg meal, that is as sustainable as you can get, really. And it doesn't have to be boiled potatoes and a bit of steamed ham. You know, you can make that really interesting, but it's just like having a small bit of really good quality meat, some good quality veg, and that's a really rounded meal, is that. We've kind of exported our carbon footprint to other countries with our food imports. If we're not careful, we're going to be exporting our biodiversity damage as well, and we just need to be really careful that by looking after things in this country that we're not just importing the problem.
Biodiversity-wise and environmentally-wise, tell me a bit about what you do at the farm, because there's a lot of buzz around, obviously, climate change at the minute. People are waking up to the emergency that's been here. I think the Nobel Prize winner last year was an environmental scientist who predicted all of this back in the 1960s, but wasn't really listened to. But I know as a family, you've been doing environmentally good things for the last 30 years, haven't you?
Yeah, we've been on schemes, or government schemes, for 30 years. Certainly in my lifetime that I can remember, we've managed things with the environment in mind. Whatever we're doing, we look at how it's going to affect nature and biodiversity and the habitats that they're in. Is it going to affect them, or can we actually improve the habitats of the biodiversity by doing something slightly different? So you don't have to make huge changes across the whole farm. You can just make little changes dotted around everywhere, and that soon links up to one big change. You know, it's more than the sum of its parts. Hedgerows are a special piece in my heart, really. We love the management of our hedges, and we do spend most of the good days through winter doing hedge laying. You see the benefit that brings. If you walk around the fields, the amount of birds that's in there now, even though it's bleak outside of them all, we're in the middle of January, but the amount of birds that's in the hedges is just phenomenal. So they're feeding on all those winter berries that are only there because of the way that we actually manage the hedges. And then those hedges then link up other habitats, so they link up the becks to the wetland areas, the woods and the hay meadows. Everything is sort of linked with these corridors of hedgerow.
I've got my hiking boots on and I'm itching to get out on the farm and walk along the hedgerows. So we'll talk about the bird life. I'm a bit of a, don't tell many people this, James, don't tell anyone, but I'm a bit of a secret twitcher. And actually, while we've been talking, I've had my eye on a little robin redbreast who's been sitting on your parents' cottage.
There's been a few knocking about all winter. They've been chittering in the buildings, and yeah, they sort of wake up same time as us, so they're singing in the buildings. And yeah, there's 2 or 3. They battle for a bit of territory, I think. It's just lovely to hear them singing through winter.
Before we leave the warm and our cup of tea, just tell me a bit about your memories growing up. I've got this image of you. I don't know whether it's right, but I've got this image of you and a pair of cords and a pair of wellies and a woolly hat on as a little nipper running around the farm helping your grandfather and father. Am I anywhere close?
Yeah, pretty much. Some very early memories of mine were going out with Dad. He'd be walking up that yard. There we were going into we call it a teapot field. So this field at the top of here is called the teapot field. We'd be going tailing lambs, I think, so we were lambing outside at the time. It was probably early March, and I remember it just been freezing cold. You know, like the wind blowing down through that gap there was just phenomenal. Dad in a big coat with his it was probably one of my grandma's old handbags or something with the tailing rings and all that sort of stuff in. I remember it must have been one of them, maybe like a big ex-army coat or something like that, big collar on it, you know, big heavy wool thing, and trudging up after Dad up there to chase around these lambs that were newborn, and they were all in the bottom of the hedge trying to keep warm out the wind and everything, and that was probably, I think, my first memory of that, yeah. You know, I can still nearly feel the cold now and the cold wind on my face now.
And on tractors and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. I remember driving a tractor when I was like 7 or 8 or something, just steering. Dad said just hold it in a straight line, and he was in the back chucking mangles, which are like a root, out for the sheep to eat behind. It's stuff that you remember doing with your dad.
It sounds to me idyllic, but I suppose at the time you probably didn't realise it was any different to anybody else because that's what you knew growing up. But is Dad, I'll wave to Dad as I arrive, but is he really proud that you've carried on the tradition, and do you think it gives him a great deal of satisfaction to watch you grow and progress the farm?
I would think so, yeah. I mean, he's still working, nearly full-time on the farm, more than full-time on the farm, if you counted it in hours. Yeah, and then I've got my son coming on now as well. So my granddad died 25 years ago, and I would like to think that he would look down on what we're doing now and be really proud. I don't think he could remember his granddad, but this generation thing with the farm, you never hand it over, really. You have these sort of peaks, I think, of when you're managing it more. I'm probably at the peak at the moment, but I've got Dad on one side of the slope, and I've got Robert coming on the other side, coming up. So you've just got these big, almost hills that you're sort of climbing, and I'm probably at the top of that at the moment, and then Dad's on his way down one side and Robert's up the other. It just flows from one to the other. You never get this rigid handover at all, even the family farm. So while, yeah, I'm probably the main decision maker on the farm, but it's never a sole decision. It's always a family decision, whatever we're doing.
When you finally get a bit of downtime, perhaps at the end of a long day and you're sitting by the fire, do you ever have a few minutes to think about legacy and what your hopes are for the future of the farm?
Yeah, I think you're thinking that all the time, though. You're thinking not just like tomorrow or next month or next year. You're thinking 10, 15, 20 years ahead with what you're doing. Like when we're hedge laying, we always say we're hedging for next time, and that next time is 20 years down the line. So it's just a continuation right through. And I would hope that it's Robert that's going to continue behind me, but it might be someone else. It might be someone else's family that takes over. You don't just know. But whatever you do when you're farming, you've really just got to make sure that you're leaving it in a good state for them, really. Good financial state, but more importantly, a good environmental state as well. So you've got good soils and hedges and clean becks and everything, and it's just something that someone can take on and be proud of themselves.
Final thought. We met doing a Countryfile live event. I interviewed you on stage with Adam Henson, one of the lovely presenters of Countryfile. Was that an amazing experience, having Countryfile here, doing the filming and getting a bit of the Strictly story out to the nation?
Yeah, it was good. They were here like 2 days, I think, for the 9 minutes or whatever it was on. But it was great to sort of see the background and the work that goes into producing something like that. And it's good to get farming out there. It needs to be out there in every medium, it does. We need people to value the food that they're buying, the countryside that they're walking through. We need them to value that, so they will respect the work that goes into it. And the more knowledge that people have of how their food is produced, the better food they'll end up buying and the better quality they'll get, which will then protect more of the environment that they're living in. We just want to get the message out there that good farming is the right way to go.
So wellies on for you. I've got my hiking boots on, woolly hats, big coats. Off to the hedgerows, hey?
Yeah, we'll go and show you some hedges and some birds, hopefully.
You've been listening to fifth-generation organic dairy farmer James Robinson talking about life at Strickley near Kendal and the challenges modern-day farmers face. Do follow James on socials. JR from Strickley, STRICKLEY, as opposed to Strictly Come Dancing, is where you'll find him and his Strictly herd. Download our series at convex.podbean.com or search The Convex Conversation on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be back next week, minus the wellies. Join me then.